What if the biggest growth lever in your business isn't new sales? What if the real difference between a $200 million firm that stalls and a $150 million firm that doubles comes down to retention and expansion discipline? And what happens when you finally apply RevOps thinking, not just to the pipeline, but to your entire client lifecycle? Hi, I'm Courtney Baker, and this is AI Know-How from Knownwell, helping you reimagine your business in the AI era. Today, we're bringing you the first half of a webinar we recorded today called Building a Revenue Engine Beyond the Sell. In this session, Knownwell CEO David DeWolf and I walk through what we call a tale of two companies. Same industry, similar growth engines, very different outcomes. And spoiler alert here, the firm that starts smaller overtakes the larger competition in under 3 years. This conversation is packed with real math, if that's exciting to you, real world operating discipline, and a clear look at how AI is finally making post-sell revenue measurable. Enjoy part one of this webinar. Part two will come your way next week. And since this is a webinar with slides and charts that tell a big part of the story, we strongly encourage you watch this episode, not just listen, but we will include the slide deck in the show notes if this is more convenient. Before we go any further, let me give you a quick overview of what to expect today. First, we're going to set the stage and show you why building a revenue engine beyond the sell can have an outsized impact on your business. It's incredible. We all get it, but when you see the numbers, you're going to be astonished, I think. We'll also give you a quick tale of two companies to see what their growth curves look like. If you're leading a firm at scale, you've likely noticed a frustrating paradox with post-sales and RevOps. Your pre-sales process is a high-tech science field, pipeline stages for leads, contacts, opportunities, conversion rates on every stage. But your post-sales world of delivery, retention, and expansion is often a high-touch art form. And we'll cover why that is and assure you that you're not alone. Then we're going to show you a new and different way to address this paradox, so you can actually build that revenue engine that continues to throttle well beyond the sell. At the end of the session, you'll also have several actionable strategies you can deploy in your organization to close that gap between the art of relationship and the science of growth. Let's get into why we are here. Why is now such a critical time for service companies to figure out how to extend their pre-sales discipline into that full customer lifecycle?
Thanks, Courtney. I'm happy to go into that, and I'm really thrilled to be here. Because when you're a B2B services firm doing hundreds of millions in annual revenue, the stakes for retention and expansion and growth aren't just high, they are nearly the entire game, even though we don't execute that way right now. Research has clearly shown that most firms in the space get about 80% of their annual revenue from existing accounts. Those are the high-performing firms. And moreover, about 70% of their incremental growth every year comes from their existing account base. Yet, where do we spend an outsized amount of our leadership energy, our investment, our growth dollars? It's on the 20% that represents the new logo hunt. So let's be honest. There's a reason for that. Everybody loves the thrill of the chase and the sales team ringing the bell when the new contract is signed. Winning new business seems like a smart, reasonable path to growth. More clients means more revenue, and more revenue means more growth. And those clients mean more service area to find that revenue, right? Well, if you're relying on filling a leaky bucket when new logos, you're going to be in for a long, hard slog. If landing new logos is your primary growth driver, it's really difficult to grow your business predictably. And we're going to see that with the math. The gap between high performing companies and the competition is often not how good they are at winning new logos. It's how good they are at keeping and growing the clients they win in the first place. So let's go ahead and look at the math to showcase why understanding this gap and acting to close it is so vitally important. Hang with me here. Imagine that we're telling a tale of two different companies. Courtney, on one hand, we have a company that's doing 200 million in annual revenue. We'll call them RevOps Light, okay?
I like that. 200 million sounds good. I'll take that.
All right, you can have it.
Okay.
You're going to regret it, but you can have it. Okay. On the other hand, we have a company that's a good bit smaller. They're doing 250 million in annual revenue. Let's call them RevOps Lifecycle. Now, both companies win new customers at the exact same rate of 15%. Here's where they differ. Company B, RevOps Lifecycle, that's the one I took that's smaller. Company B has cracked the code on both reducing churn and expanding their services within existing clients. They've become world-class at reducing churn in their existing client base, knocking it down to just 3% each year. You and I have both seen this math enough to know how long it will take for Company B to surpass Company A. For our audience, if you want to take a minute to come up with a guess, how long do you think it'll take our company called RevOps Lifecycle to make up this $50 million annual revenue gap? Think about it. Here's the harsh reality for RevOps Lite. It is under 3 years. RevOps Lifecycle will surpass them in about 2.5 years. Within 5 years, RevOps Lifecycle will have more than doubled in annual revenue. They'll have left RevOps Lite completely in the dust with $72 million more in annual revenue.
I changed my mind.
I told you you'd regret it. Just wait. The bad news is going to keep piling up. Just to reiterate, to drive this point home, these two firms win new business at the exact same rate. 5 years later, one is barely growing. The other has more than doubled. The difference between them isn't sales. It's operating discipline within their existing account portfolio, that existing client base. So, as we get into the meat of the webinar here, and as you think about how to apply these ideas in your business, I want you to ask yourself this question. Which company would you rather be? Which company is better positioned for the future? Which company looks more attractive to acquirers or investors?
David, again, I mentioned this at the top, and I feel like this is something we intuitively know, but honestly, we rarely take the time to stop and look at the actual numbers. What really makes this jump off the page also is if you say, okay, what if RevOps Lifecycle is actually worse at winning new clients and looking at those numbers?
Totally. Well, let's go to that videotape then, right? Same exact stats, except RevOps Lifecycle isn't as good at attracting the new logos. It's hard to be great at both things. So what if we actually swap the investment? We go the other way and say they're not as great as new business development. They only grow new logos at a rate of 10% per year, while RevOps Lite stays steady at 15%. So they are 1/3 less performant in that area. Let's fast forward 5 years and let's see where we land. I think you're going to like my choice better still. At the end of year 5, RevOps Lifecycle has still surpassed RevOps Lite. It took them a little under 4.5 years to do so. And instead of the roughly 2.5 years when they're winning new logos at the same rate. So if you're going to choose one in the long term, you've got to prioritize that existing account base. So Not to beat a dead horse, I know I've said it a few times, but once again, which company would you rather be? You'd rather be the company that is earning more revenue and growing substantially faster, even if you're not as good at that sexy thing of ringing the bell and winning new clients. So hopefully we painted a pretty vivid picture here that the key to growth in B2B services is retention and expansion. That's how you drive predictable growth in a business. With some new logos added in to also help fuel the growth, of course we have to win new logos, but we don't have to outperform there. We have to outperform in the existing account base.
Yeah, and this feels like a shift from the growth at all cost era that we have been in. And so I think it's so helpful to spend a minute here just to reframe how we're thinking about this because it's kind of ingrained in us,
Totally.
especially those of us that have lived maybe over on the pre-sale side.
And I love the point of the at all costs because the data clearly shows not only it is this payoff in the long run, it's actually more profitable growth. It's more efficient growth to focus this way as well. So while we're talking about and focused on the top line and you win there, the reality is you win even bigger on the bottom line.
Yeah, so true. And yep, I totally take it back. Don't want company A. I traded back. You have it, company A. Okay, David, you've spent a lot of time helping businesses reach this kind of accelerated growth curve. You've also done a lot of customer research in the process of building Knownwell. What does the problem that RevOps Lite is facing look like in their business?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to explain it is this concept of pre sales rigor versus post sales guessing, right? In the pre sale, we run things based on data, discipline, rigor, right? The highest performing sales organizations, right? Those go to market engines that everybody raves about, brings in the new chief revenue officer, the chief marketing officer. What do? They run it by the data. It's a science, it's a machine. Those are literally the words we use to describe it. In the post sale world, there's none of that. We run things based on vibes, gut feel, what it feels like. That has to change if you want to become more like RevOps Lifecycle and less like RevOps Lite.
And David, I wonder if we should pause here to just say marking red, yellow, green on a spreadsheet, which is what we see overwhelmingly in services firms, that is the form of vibes because it is so hard. What you really see is that is a usually a indication of relationship strength. And we'll talk
Yeah,
about why it's so much more than that.
100%. And Courtney, what's shocking about that, we have done extensive customer research, including over 600 personal interviews with B2B services companies. Over 90% of them still use red, yellow, green on a spreadsheet in order to track their client health and to drive execution. And we have found very few leaders, if any, that actually trust that data. Because not that they have bad people, not anything against the individuals, but it's all based on gut. And there's all sorts of bias and personal subjectivity baked into that. There's not objective measurement and signaling. And oftentimes you have different perspectives that conflict. There's all sorts of mess there that is really difficult. And even if you're using things like an NPS score or a CSAT score to complement that, those things aren't designed for operational scientific rigor of a machine. They're designed for brand pulses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And anecdotes that are 3 months or 6 months old don't give you the operational real-time data you need to run your client services the way you run your sales machine. Can you imagine if you were asking prospects how likely they were to buy and running your entire funnel off of that? Right? Makes no sense.
Yeah.
Let's think about the level of discipline you've built into your sales organization. It is a managed, predictable science. You don't just hope for revenue, you manage the system. You are looking at stage conversion rates to see where deals are stalling. You're measuring pipeline velocity to know how fast a lead becomes a contract. You have a weekly pipeline review where every opportunity is scrutinized. And if a deal hasn't moved in 14 days, the flag goes up, right? We have a science. You manage by weighted probabilities and hard data. You have win-loss analyses, forecast calls, and resource planning meetings. You've invested millions into your CRM systems, most likely, and sales enablement too, to ensure that your pre-sales operating system is airtight. But for most firms, the moment that that contract is signed, the scientific rigor walks out the door. The relationship moves from a system to a black box. We stop managing by data and start managing by intuition. Instead of stage conversions, we rely on subjective status reports, self-reporting, anecdotes. Instead of a pipeline review, we have check-ins where we ask, how are things going with the client? And the answer is almost always great or not so hot. And everybody has a different opinion. We treat the most valuable part of our business, the economic engine of our business, right? Remember, over 80% of in-year revenue for the top growing firms. This existing client base, we treat it as an art form that can't be measured. And managing by vibes is why we end up with that leaky bucket that we saw earlier. We've mastered the science of the chase, but we're still practicing the art of the relationship post-sale. So where does that leave us? Usually with a lot of thrashing and moaning and growing and wondering why it's so hard to grow. We talk about things not being able to be measurable. We talk about not understanding really what's going on or why somebody churned, right? We're missing everything.
So what I hear you saying, David, is basically we end up as company A, RevOps, like whether we like it or not.
Or even worse, 100%. And here's what you need to grapple with. The real reason why growing your existing clients feels like an art is because the truth about your clients is currently invisible. It's what we call the ghost in the revenue machine, right? Let's remember the old adage. We manage what we measure. In pre-sales, we have all of that structured data, the rigor, the process around it. But in the post-sale world, you shift over to managing relationships based on a gut feel because we feel like we're in the relationship business. We know the client. We just had dinner with them. And the things you need to measure and instrument are squishier. They're softer, right? This relationship thing. It's an art, right? They're buried in the tone of an email thread, the frequency of Slack messages, the sentiment of a meeting transcript, and the health of these multi-threaded relationships that you need up and down your client's organization to grow. And even in the broader context of how the company is performing, are they growing themselves? Is the work you're doing for them contributing to their growth? Mix all of that up together, and you often end up with some combination of one of these archetypes. There's the single-threaded giant, where your biggest account is one executive change away from a collapse. There's the quiet quitter, where a drop in communication velocity may be the only warning that you'll ever get. There's the legacy trap, where you're delivering perfectly on a strategy that the client has already abandoned, and they pigeonhole you into only doing that one thing. Finally, there's the echo chamber, where you're relying on an account manager's vibes rather than the client's actual holistic company-wide sentiment and feeling about how the relationship's going. These aren't just edge cases, and usually there's not just one of these happening at a time, but a combination of them all happening at the same time. If you could instrument your post-sales systems and processes to listen for these signals and do it according to what the research shows actually drives retention and growth, then you can drive the kind of best-in-class net revenue retention that will get you from company A to company B levels of growth.
Okay, David, I think you've done an incredible job helping set up the problem. Now, I would love for you to help us figure out where do we go from here? How should the audience be thinking about what they can do to extend that pre-sales discipline, that RevOps discipline into post-sale and account management?
Well, Courtney, I come from a software engineering background, right? I started
Mhm.
my career in software engineering before I even got into business. And in software, there is this concept of shift left with testing. And what that means is you want to bring testing into the development process as early as humanly possible so you can catch bugs before they make it into production. The earlier we catch them, the cheaper they are to fix and the easier they are to fix, right? Well, research from IBM and others has found that roughly it's 100 times more costly to fix a bug later in the process when it's already in production than fixing it early in the design phase. What we're encouraging here today is very similar. And what we'll lay out in the framework we're about to present is we want the audience to shift right with their RevOps discipline. You do it exceptionally well early on, but how do we move it further in the client lifecycle? So that means taking some kind of rigorous approach, the same kind that we have in the sales world, and we want to use it to manage and measure client health, satisfaction, renewals, expansion, so that you can take that winning work, that DNA you have in sales, and you can apply it and get to first place.
David, can I jump in here and just give everybody a little encouragement? Because
Yeah.
I want to remind everybody that your pre-sales operations didn't look the way it looks today 15 years ago.
So true. So
It
true.
was very similar to what we have today in post-sales. It was a lot of golf outings, having lunch with some, it was very much about the relationship. And obviously that has completely changed. So if you're sitting there right now thinking, oh gosh, yeah, this is a problem, and hopefully you do feel that. But I also want to give you a little glimmer of hope. Obviously, that has happened, that transformation has happened pre-sales, and it absolutely can happen for the post-sales function as well.
Courtney, that's so spot on. And if you think about how sales ops became rev ops, and now what we're saying is rev ops has to become commercial ops, right? It is about the continued scientification, right, of the entire commercial go-to-market machine. We started with sales ops, we integrated marketing into that, we had a holistic funnel for rev ops. Well, now we're saying it's got to include the entire commercial life cycle, right? So, such a good point. And there's hope because you're not alone. This is very, very common.
Hopefully, we've done a good job setting up the problem today. But in part 2, we get exactly how firms can operationalize retention and expansion and what that shift looks like culturally inside the organization. If you don't want to wait a week, check the show notes. We'll post a link to the full on-demand webinar so you can watch the entire session start to finish. Thanks, as always, for listening and watching. Don't forget to give us a review on your favorite podcast player of choice. We really appreciate it. And at the end of every show, we like to ask one of our AI friends to weigh in on the topic at hand. So, hey, ChatGPT, today we're talking about how service firms can flip the leaderboard through retention and expansion discipline and rigor, not just new logo growth. So, what's your take?
If a service firm wants to flip the leaderboard, it has to treat retention and expansion like a revenue engine, with tight process, clear accountability, and zero tolerance for sloppy handoffs. New logos get the headlines, but disciplined delivery, expansion plays, and churn control are what actually compound.
And now you're the know. Thanks as always for listening. We'll see you next week with more AI applications, discussions, and experts.
Hey, if you made it this far in the episode, first of all, thank you. And second, we know that AI is changing all the time, and so we've got you covered. Here is another great episode for you to watch to stay in the loop on what's happening in AI and business. And second of all, we'd love for you to subscribe. You can do that right here. I always wanted to do that, by the way. So do that now. That would be great.